We've talked on this show a lot of times about wanting to take every property, every adaptation, as seriously as the people who care about it. That has now translated in a lot of adaptations to making the material serious. But sometimes that's not the right way to go. Sometimes if you have a really cartoonish property, you need to treat it with that same cartoonishness.
Yeah, Street Fighter is one such example of how to take a beloved fan property and turn it into something that is appropriately silly. But is it the best silly adaptation of Street Fighter that we could have hoped for?
Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is GenreVision. GenreVision is a weekly movie club where we discuss horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And we continue Fighting Fools Month with Street Fighter, also known as, Street Fighter the Movie, which led to Street Fighter the Movie the Game. That's a real thing. Look it up. This is one of the notorious 90s video game adaptations. I believe this came out the year after Super Mario Brothers. Go listen to our Super Mario Brothers episode. And was actually financially successful, critically reviled, as pretty much the majority of video game movies have been, certainly in their earliest adaptations. It is an adaptation of the Capcom fighting game Street Fighter, specifically Street Fighter 2, which was impossible not to run into if you went into an arcade in the 90s.
Yeah, ubiquitous everywhere.
I would say Street Fighter 2 was even more ubiquitous than Mortal Kombat.
I'm willing to bet you're correct, yeah. I feel like that was, it was bloodless, so obviously It was going to be more common. Like if you went to the ice skating rink, they're going to have Street Fighter 2. I saw a lot of Marvel vs. Capcom as well. So
yes, I sunk some serious time into Marvel vs. Capcom.
Yeah, lost many quarters on such games.
Oh yeah, my team of Mega Man and Venom. Anyways, Street Fighter is written and directed by Steven D'Souza, who we have actually, I would say, championed at least one time on this show.
We've done Commando.
Yes, which we love.
We've done Die Hard on the show.
That's true.
So, I think if you look at Steven D'Souza's filmography as far as writing, like he is known for Hollywood action movies that are like markedly funny. He did 48 Hours, for instance. He has a writing credit on Beverly Hills Cop 3. He has a writing credit on Judge Dredd. So he's known for a certain kind of like comedic action film.
Broadness. I would say he is... more so than just being specifically funny or comedically motivated, he is looking to create something that is broadly entertaining.
Sure, yeah, he wrote 48 Hours, and that was a huge crowd pleaser, so yeah.
Mm-hmm. Street Fighter obviously has a notorious reputation and is widely disliked, has started to get some reappraisal from, I think, ironic crowds and people who call it, campy and everything like that. I have to admit this up front because I don't want there to be any illusions about how this is coloring my appraisal of it. This was a movie I saw a lot as a kid, like really young. I had the VHS of it and I really liked it as a kid. And I had not revisited it for many years until we did this watch. And there, I think, will be things about it that I'm just too familiar with it. And I will admit that. However, upon rewatching it, I will say that part of the reason I think Street Fighter is disliked is because it is a movie that is clearly having fun with the property. And we have learned over the years that when making adaptations, people want the adaptation to take the material as seriously as the person who enjoys it takes the material.
Right. If they love a thing with, sincerity, then they want that seriousness and that sincerity matched in the adaptation often. And then that's how we end up with a lot of dark and gritty stuff. It's like, well, we take this seriously because you do. And I'm like, there's a mismatch in what you think seriousness is. This, I think, is suitably goofy. Like, I don't think that is a problem with the movie because they're adapting a fighting game that's with like all these, classic pixel art graphics, hand-drawn, extreme models. I don't think the goofiness with the Street Fighter film is at all a problem. But, going back to adaptation, I feel like in adaptation, the substance of what people actually like about Street Fighter as a property is pretty lost here because they're taking some of the, characters and basic concepts from the game, but ultimately it's not really a movie about, people throwing down and having like fights. Yeah, that happens in it, but it's more like a big, almost like Rambo 2 or something like that. Shoot 'em up,
Right. I mean, Stephen DeSouza has talked about this. There's a great interview with him and some of the other people that made the movie that The Guardian did. And he talks about when he was pitching this movie, which was apparently very last minute, that he was not interested in doing a tournament movie, that he wanted to do something that was more of, as far as with this property, doing kind of a political action setup as far as the structure. And that's what it is. And there's certainly some precedent for that in the source material.
Yeah, if you look at the characters like Colonel Guile and M. Bison, it's like, yeah, these are the kinds of characters who do those sorts of things. But I think actually trying to build the plot of the movie around that stuff makes for a loss of the fighting game experience.
Right. Well, again, it's not a tournament movie in that it is about, all right, this person's now going to match up with this person's not going to match. I mean, there's a point very early on in the movie where, as they call him, Ryu, in this, and as opposed to Ryu, is going to fight Vega in a underground cage fight. And just as the timer goes off and they're about to fight, Jean-Claude Van Damme as Guile bursts through in a tank and arrests everybody. And I feel like that is a thematic Rosetta Stone for what's going on with the movie and adaptation. It's like, here's this, it's a versus movie, but now we're going to burst into it with this big military plot, because the entire idea is that Bison, played by Raul Julia, is the leader of this nation, Shadaloo, which I believe in the games, Shadaloo is not a nation. It's just a criminal organization.
Okay.
So that is a change, a big change in adaptation, to where it's like, no, he rules over a very particular nation, and he has kidnapped a bunch of hostages and is going to kill them in 72 hours unless the allied nations, not the UN, because this is their fictional version of it, unless the allied nations and the nations of the world pay him $20 billion, he's going to kill all these hostages. And his entire madman motivation is that he wants to create his own nation. He wants to take over the world and make it an incredible, utopia in his eyes.
Sure.
And Colonel Guile is apparently the figure that is going to stop him, because he is the leader of the Allied nations troop, and has apparently, according to very quick news beats during the opening credits, has been fighting Bison for some amount of time.
Right. So Colonel Guile, obviously big military man, that didn't really need a lot of repurposing. Cammy is his sort of second in command. She's played by Kylie Minogue, the incredible pop star. Raul Julia as Bison, being a dictator in an incredible costume, like that hasn't changed. But I think all of the other roles in the movie have been pretty like heavily rewritten to find jobs and things like that would make sense in a war zone. Chun-Li, for instance, now is a journalist. She appears on camera and does news reports, and then her camera crew is the boxer guy, I forget his name, Balrog, and then E Honda, and they're her like news crew who shoots and edits and broadcasts from the van and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, he's not just like a sumo guy that like beats people up. Or
well, here's the thing: in adaptation, I understand the inclination to be like you're saying, if you look at the game, I don't care whatever backstory is in it, because as knowledgeable as I am about Street Fighter, I don't really care about Street Fighter.
Me neither, and I'm not a huge Street Fighter person. I don't give a shit. It's I chose that guy because he looks cool and I like his moveset,
Like when you're saying about Ia Honda is a great example, where it's like in the game he's a sumo guy. Like that's it. That is his character. That's all he needs to be for that medium. In this, it's like, okay, how are we going to fit all of these characters into this particular plot that we want to do?
Right. Overthrowing a dictatorship in Asia, basically.
Yes, because like if you have an issue with the core, I'm not saying you specifically, I'm talking about anybody. Like if there's an issue with the core idea of like, okay, this is about overthrowing a cartoonish dictatorship, Basically in the equivalent of something like Thailand or the Philippines and stuff, which, they shot in Thailand.
Right.
If that feels like a perversion of the source material for you, you're never going to be on board with how that sort of, splinters out to the rest of the characters. For example, making Guile the main character is pretty sacrilegious from an adaptation point in general, because he's not the main character of the franchise. It's Ryu. And here, Ryu and Ken are they have been completely changed. There's some lip service paid to, like, they had a sensei and trained together and stuff like that. But there is no remnant of the characters as they became developed throughout the lore of the games and other, like, the anime series and other properties and stuff like that.
Right. Here they're repurposed into roguish con men who are initially introduced as like, are they gun runners? They're trying to worm their way into the seedy underbelly of Shadaloo's, criminal organizations. And that doesn't go too well for them. And they end up being tasked by Guile to infiltrate the Bison dictatorship, basically, get some sort of inside role. Ming-Na Wen as Chun-Li, I feel like is, decent casting. Yeah, Ming-Na Wen's great.
In all honesty, I wish there was more focus on Chun-Li, because they give her the battle between Guile and Bison, I will admit, not very good. It's set up early on where one of the hostages that Bison is taken as he snaps soldiers' necks really quickly is a friend of Guile's, Carlos Blanca, Blanca.
Blanca, of Blanca fame.
Charlie, who's a totally different character in the games, Charlie. Chun-Li is interviewing Guile in the beginning, and Guile knows that Bison loves to watch. He's like, I know you like seeing yourself on TV, you sick son of a bitch. At the end of that, as he's broadcasting to Bison, then Bison cuts in and they have a little back and forth. Guile says, Charlie, I'm coming for you. And it's like, okay, so his personal stake, other than him just being the hero of the military that has to stop the bad dictator, is that one of his friends is there. That's okay, but it's not well developed. Like, we see one home movie of Guile with Charlie, Blanca.
It's so strange. Guile, later on in the movie, Guile is in a stealth boat, like driving it actively down the river.
It's going upriver.
And he just like looks away to watch home movies for a minute while driving the boat. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? It's crazy. But anyway, this I think is a really clear intention in how to adapt this, like with for American audiences. Like, okay, well, it needs to be jingoistic. It needs to have the white guy as like the military American hero against clearly foreign dictatorship. It needed to be a structure that people recognized in American cinema. And so naturally the jingoistic American action film, military action film, was that structure that they decided to impose upon all this. And for me, that holds no water. Like, I just don't really care about the way that don't care for the way that they decided to adapt this. I think the only thing that comes out of that at all looking good is Raul Julia as Bison.
This was a star power driven vehicle. That's reflected in the budget. The budget was around $30 million, and apparently Raul Julia and Jean-Claude Van Damme took significant chunks out of that budget.
It doesn't surprise me, because I think for $30 million for a movie made in 1993, released in 1994, like, in so many scenes, when there's not big stars in the scenes, they just look surprisingly, shockingly cheap.
Oh, I mean,
dinky.
D'Souza has talked about that, where it's like they were rushing to make sets super quickly.
Sure, shooting in Thailand didn't help. I know they shot a big chunk in Australia as well.
They did, and apparently there was a potential government coup going on in Thailand at the time that they were dealing with, and that hastened what they had to do. Go read that Guardian article. We'll link to it in the post, because it's extremely. I was so glad I'd never read about the making of this movie before. But we got to talk about the two stars, and we'll start with Raul Julia, because most importantly, I think, or at least most notably with this was his last on-screen role. The movie's even dedicated to him in the end, with a very specific dedication, which is Vaya con Dios.
Yep, for Raul, Vaya con Dios. And that was touching, I felt. It being Raul Julia's last film does imbue the film with some inherent specialness. Because, Raul Julia was a fucking legend. And if there's anybody coming out of this movie just really able to be like proud of what they did here, it's him because he is executing perfect ham.
It's got to be why they hired him. As written, Bison is a cartoon. All the characters are cartoons. And I think that eventually is one of the reasons why the drama, they don't do the necessary time to really sell the genuine drama of the piece. But Raul Julia commands the screen when he is like, there's so many moments where he's allowed to monologue or just throw out fun little quips and stuff like that. And it's great. Like, a lot of people, if you look up stuff, it'll be the big, when he has his whole, they call me a madman. Like, I want to, I just want to create the perfect genetic soldier.
Yeah.
Like, Raul Julia sells that line in the same way that Bela Lugosi was able to sell a race of genetically engineered supermen who will one day conquer the world in Bride of the Monster.
Sure.
There is a through line between those two performances for me. But for me, Raul Julia, as much as I adore him, going game over and all the big stuff, it's his smaller humor moments that really get me.
The guy was a master. You look at his performances in the Addams Family movies, he just had such an incredible sense of timing. What makes this even more sad and also more admirable for him is like he was fighting stomach cancer the whole time.
Yeah. When they first went out to, meet with him about taking on the role and he was accepting it, they saw him and the assistant or whoever it was that went and did that came back and said, we can't put him on camera. Like he is a skeleton. Like we have to push his shooting further down the schedule because we have to get him to gain weight.
They do a pretty decent job of beefing him up. Like one of the fun credits in this is like M. Bison's costume designer was credited differently.
Yes.
They brought on a different costume designer for M. Bison, and it was totally worth it because those costumes are great, even down to the light up soles of his fucking magnetic hover boots.
Oh yeah. I mean, it cuts that perfect it's the kind of cartoon design I really miss in these adaptations where it's like, that looks like a good translation of the over the top stylized costuming that you see in the video game to an approximation of reality. And, this movie is clearly not too concerned with reality because it's having fun, sometimes at its own expense. But Julia, it's so clear how game he was for this, to do this. I mean, he's talked about where, like a lot of things, when you hear this from actors, is like, my kids liked it. They liked Street Fighter, so I did it for that. But he didn't, you never get the sense that he was dismissive of what he was doing. When he's on screen and he's doing his dictator spiel or, for you, the day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
He knows this is a silly movie, but I don't think he says, in his performance that silly is a negative. I think his performance really says like there's value in silliness, and I'm here for that.
Totally agree. Now, on the flip side of the coin, we have Jean-Claude Van Damme, who I have gone to bat for more times than anybody ever should. I am an unabashed Jean-Claude Van Damme apologist. And I've even started to sway Travis over with a couple particular movies that we've watched where it's like, I don't know, there's something there I think you might like. There's something unique. However, I fully admit that Jean-Claude Van Damme is horrendously miscast in Street Fighter.
Yes. Yeah. It's just not a particularly good performance from him. And there's a whole bunch of reasons. Like you said, number one, miscast. He's just not this guy.
It's just not taking advantage of what is so unique about him as an action star.
Right. Doesn't play to his strengths at all.
No, not at all. It's also the fact that in adaptation, Guile is like, he's I believe in the original lineup, the only American character in the Street Fighter roster.
Sure.
And the point of him is he is supposed to be a garish caricature of American militarism.
And, American military movies at the time had this really odd habit of casting European men with thick accents as like their jingoistic icon, which was crazy, but it works, particularly well in movies like Commando or Predator. But here, it's just not that character. Like Van Damme's particular strengths were playing these characters who were complicated or sad. You know, he's great in Universal Soldier. Like, if I'm looking at his IMDb page right now, and there's a quadruple feature DVD cover with Time Cop, Hard Target, Street Fighter, and The Quest, and he's making the same fucking sad boy face on every single poster.
Oh yeah.
However, Street Fighter isn't playing to those like, I'm the European action, martial arts man, but I have a core of sadness about me.
Yeah, there's no tragedy to Guile as a character.
Yeah, and there should be for a good Van Damme character. There should be some elements of tragedy to it.
But instead, they want him to be the big American flag. What's interesting in this also from adaptation is that it's not American militarism. This is portrayed as the, quote, allied nations. This is supposed to be a United Nations fictionalized version of their army. If they wanted to get into interesting political discussion about that, that is interesting. The movie doesn't care. Like, it's total action figure reasoning for doing this.
Oh yeah.
And possibly also to make it a better sell overseas. But there is a good thing about Jean-Claude Van Damme being miscast. He is so miscast that his performance, it doesn't even border on parody. It dives into the deep end of self. Like, I cannot lie that a big part of me enjoys Van Damme in this movie because he is so wrong-headedly doing everything when it comes to the role. And the role is just written insanely wrong for him.
Yeah, it's an utter mismatch, and it's made even worse by the fact that, like, you can tell Van Damme had a really serious coke habit at the time. He's just so overloaded.
I informed Travis about this. This is from that Guardian piece where it's like he had a coke. He has admitted himself during this period that he had a incredibly destructive coke habit.
Yeah, he's admitted to a lot during the production of this, having an affair with Kylie Minogue and all this stuff.
And being very, everybody says like he was the big swinging dick movie star. We wouldn't start until he wanted to, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
I would be slightly tolerant of that if it was like, he put in a good performance, but he doesn't, except at the pinnacle, the pinnacle thing that is from this movie when it comes to Jean-Claude Van Damme is they give him the speech. He gets the big motivational speech. And it is when the pencil neck dweeb from the Allied nations has shown up just as they're about to launch their big operative to go beat Bison. And the pencil neck comes out and is like, Colonel Guile, we're going to pay him his ransom demands for the hostages, and you're going to stop this attack. Here are your orders. You have to read them to your troops. And fucking Jean-Claude Van Damme, God bless him, this is his moment.
And he goes up there. He gets up behind that lectern and he's leaning on. He's troopers have just received new orders.
The war is canceled. I could recite that whole monologue. I love it so much, but we can all go home. Because here's the thing. If there is any moment for Van Damme where he's like, this is my acting moment, this is it. They've engineered it for him. It reaches such levels of ridiculousness that I don't believe that Steven D'Souza, who also directed this, was intending for this to come across as parody. But as Guile is talking about this, like Bison's being paid off for his crimes and all this, and they're cutting to the soldiers. There's soldiers like frowning and shaking their heads. I think one of them just goes, no. Like,
yeah, they cut to some fun extras close-ups in this sequence. But like, I think what you're talking about here with like this sequence being really funny is like, look, Steven D'Souza was a more than adequate writer of action comedies. Like, he knows what funny is. The problem is he's not a great director.
No, I will totally cede that point. Street Fighter is an incredibly, this is very mean to say, and I'm sorry, Steven D'Souza, it's a pedestrian looking movie.
Totally. And I understand that there's going to be, a lot of concessions that they had to make with budget that would inhibit that. But as far as like filmmaking language and style, just in the basics of it, it's like, yeah, it's, it kind of holds together. It's fine. There's nothing special about its style.
However, his comedy does shine through as a director when it comes to audio gags, because there are a couple audio gags in Street Fighter that fucking sing. There are two that I'm thinking of, and both of them strangely have to do with E. Honda. One is eventually E. Honda and his compatriots get captured and he's being tortured, and he's up on this, rack thing. He's getting whipped, and the torturer's like, yeah, I'm going to show you how we do it here in Shadaloo, and whips E Honda, and it cuts to E Honda, nice little like kind of medium shot of his face. And he's just like, no, doesn't affect me. And you hear this kind of like Hawaiian,
it's real strange. It is, it's, I mean, if you want to call that a joke, it's certainly a bit of
it's humor,
potentially racist joke.
Oh, sure. There's racism.
Well, there's a really silly kaiju movie spoof joke at the expense of E Honda, where E Honda is fighting, I think, Zangief, and they're stumbling through a miniature city.
Yes.
It's almost like the joke didn't come across at all until they just dubbed a whole bunch of Godzilla roars over the scene. Where I'm like, well, if you had actually shot that correctly and, put the right score over it, then people would get the joke without you having to just pump Godzilla roars in for, reasons.
It's a super surreal moment. It reminds me of the moment from Crank 2 High Voltage, where it just suddenly turns into a kaiju fight.
Sure.
And it's like, oh, that works better in that movie because the surrealism of it is so over that we get it immediately. But this one was like, oh, because a bunch of guards are just like, turn to this monitor. What's going on in there? And they are watching Zangief and E Honda fight over this model city. And it sounds like the Godzilla roars are coming from the monitor they're watching. And it's like, what is going on?
Yeah, I didn't, I get what they were going for, but it didn't work. And, obviously there's a whole lot of, I shouldn't say there's a whole lot, but there's a sufficient enough, amount of like, oh, they're trying to get this moment in to appeal to Japanese audiences because they knew there would be a Japanese audience because it's a Japanese property originally. Mm-hmm. So they make sure to have like, Japanese soldiers from the AN with speaking roles, where it's like, oh, this character has a speaking role for like 2 scenes.
Fun fact, that actor, the character's name is Captain Sawada.
Yes.
And he was the person that Capcom wanted to play Ryu.
Oh.
Steven D'Souza's like, he can barely speak English. Like, I can't put him in this lead role, as much of a lead role as Ryu is in the movie.
It's not.
But other than Raul Julia, the best intentional comedic performance, I think, is by Andrew Brynjarski, who is Zangief. Zangief is legit funny in this movie. It's big, dumb, stupid 4-quadrant popcorn humor, but he knows that and he plays it like that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The character is written as this big, stupid, hairy, muscle-bound moron, this like total huge hench person, and Brian Arsky understands exactly what the role calls for, and he delivers it, I think, perfectly. It's great. They put this big, silly patch of chest hair on him because that's exactly what Zangief looks like in the game. So
he's got the scars too, which
are weirdly painted on. They look like shit.
It's great. It's fine. It's a cartoon.
It's all there.
Miguel Nunez isn't bad in this. He's DJ, who's completely changed from this. Miguel Nunez,
he's got a really bad Jamaican accent in this movie.
Yes,
though. Woof.
There's a point where he's escaping, and Zangief is like, we have to fight the invaders. They're evil, and DJ's like, don't you get it, man? We're the bad guys. Like, we're the ones who are bad. They're coming to beat us up. And then he's like, Bison is a bad guy, and he's like, why did you work for him? He's like, because he paid me well. And then Dolly close up into Zangief's face. He just goes, you got paid?
Yeah, I had a laugh at that. I had a chuckle at that.
Great laugh. Yeah. Like genuine good laugh. And that's the thing. I almost wish the movie was deliberately stupider. I think it would be even better.
That would be fun if it was a little bit more self-aware of just kind of how stupid it was. Maybe it was trying a little too hard to be good. I don't know.
Well, and that's why I say, like, because the whole storyline with Blanca, in which he is now Guile's friend who is now being turned into a genetic experiment and all this stuff, that goes to a level of super seriousness in which Guile breaks in and, sees him and, he's doing the, like, oh, don't look at me. I'm horrible. Oh my God, I'm so awful. And Guile is he's like, I'll help you. And he's going to shoot Blanca in the head. And
like old Yeller. Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Like, I was like, this is in the movie where Raul Julia screams game over. Like, this is, we understand that a lot of people have complaints about movies that don't keep a tonal similarity throughout. And that's not an inherent problem for us, because if you can handle tonal switches well, it's fine. But this is where it's like, these are such polar extremes in tone. And another mitigating factor is that the movie has not earned this level of drama. So it's just all bad.
Well, and then fucking both Dalsim, who was the scientist who did all this genetic experimentation on Blanca, both Dalsim and Blanca fucking disappear from the movie. After, being built up throughout the entire movie, there is a moment where Jean-Claude Van Damme is going to shoot Blanca to put him out of his misery, and then nothing happens. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, they pop up towards the end again, and they're just like, because he's like, Dalsim's so bad in this movie. Not even as an adaptation, just as a character.
Yes.
Where he's like, you were going to kill him? What gives you that choice? And then later, Dalsim's showing him, he's like, we're going to stay here while this place explodes. Like, it's like, what? What
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Yeah. Ebity, that's all, folks.
I mean, here's the thing is, there are plenty of base pleasures that I really like about Street Fighter. And it's the stuff that leans into the humor and the cartooniness of it. When Guile comes up out of the pod that Blanca's supposed to exit to kill all of the hostages, and he just rockets out of it doing a flying kick, it's like, yeah, that's correct. That's, in adaptation, that's correct, because that's the ridiculous cartooniness of the game. There's a point during the fight between Raul Julia and Jean-Claude Van Damme where Guile does his big, like, spinning backflip kick like 2 or 3 times. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, not only is like, hey, look, street fighting, but also, Steven D'Souza tries to frame it from, that proscenium, look of the video game of like, here it is, here's these 2 people here, there. But it doesn't look nearly as good as something like, another movie that we'll talk about. But it's those moments where it's like, yes, lean it, like, the fact that Blanca looks as stupid as he does, because it's like, yeah, that's what the character looks like. That's good. But then trying to heap on, like, there's this whole thing where he's being programmed with horrible footage, but then Dalsim's going to switch the footage to like dolphins and Martin Luther King Jr. speeches, like, to save him. And
yeah, it reminded me of the apes getting all the footage of violence in 28 Days Later.
Sure. It's that where it's like, yeah, you're not managing the tonal shifts here at all. It's really bad. And before we start getting towards the ending here, I do want to highlight one of your main criticisms that we had when we were doing our screening. And it's that there is no true protagonist in Street Fighter. It's attempting to be an ensemble movie.
It is, and in doing so, I think it abandons any sense of like proper perspective on any of the events happening. So it ends up feeling like a movie about a situation instead of a movie that has a story. Because often story is informed by perspective and who's experiencing it, and how and why. So yeah, it's not a great story. It ends up it tries to put movie stars in this movie, but it ends up feeling like it's not starring anybody.
Well, and that's why I wish that they had, this was not going to happen, unfortunately, but Chun-Li is the best possible lead character.
Totally.
As far as hero, because she has a personal backstory as to why she wants Bison dead.
And she does like detective work in the movie, which is great.
Yes, exactly. Like, she feels like she's making forward momentum. She's making choices and things that are getting her into conflicts and causing problems for herself or for Bison. Ming-Na Wen, of course, is great in it because she's fucking Ming-Na Wen. That makes the most sense. So when she gets captured and her and Bison have their little scene and she's talking about the history, it's like, yeah, this is the hero and the villain big moment. This is their big philosophical showdown, as you have in these types of movies. But then Chun-Li mostly just disappears. She doesn't get revenge on Bison. She's, just running around with everybody at the end. And so I will agree that the ensemble approach really doesn't work, because it doesn't end up like, it wants you to think Guile is the main character, but there's a big portion of the movie where he's pretending to be dead. And then again, he's not involved in a lot of the immediate conflicts that are going on in the script. So much of the script is him like, all right, we're going to go get Bison. We're going to do it. Here we go. And when that finally happens, it's like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. There's finally some forward momentum,
but the movie doesn't drag because the movie has been edited so down to its bare essentials.
Yeah, I mean, it's a short movie. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I never actively hated it. You know, I can never say I was like really actively pissed off, or the movie was never doing stuff that was like infuriating. That it never verged on that territory for me. It just was a movie, and I was, you know, okay, yeah, all right, that's okay, yep, that's happening. It was one of the more neutral movie experiences I've had in I don't know, couple of years. It's just I don't really have a whole lot more to say about it. It's just like, yeah, I'll never watch that again, but it didn't piss me off.
Like I said at the beginning, I watched this a lot as a kid, and that absolutely factors into it. But even as an adult, a lot of the things that I found myself in, because as a kid, I remember being like, man, Guile's speech is so funny. Like, not being aware of why it was funny, but just thinking like,
sure,
this is funny. Like, I'm finding this humorous. You know, when he's like, I'm not going home. I'm going to get on my boat. I'm going to go upriver. I'm going to kick that son of a bitch bison's ass so hard that the next bison wannabe is going to feel it. And then they're cutting to the soldiers, and the soldiers are like, yeah, nodding their heads like, all right. I'm like, this is like Starship Troopers without being aware that it's satire.
Yeah, there is some funniness to that. And there's also some funniness, however unintentional, to things like, you know, Van Damme, you know, getting his big close-up where he can flex his bicep with the American flag tattoo, the Guile American flag tattoo. But it's moments like that where I'm like, man, this whole fucking, you know, this whole thing with Van Damme is like the American colonel. I'm like, this is a sham. This is a sham. You're all deluded.
Yeah, it's a total. It's such a lie.
But the thing is, like, even in the best Van Damme movies, that's still happening. Where you're like, oh, he plays, you know, Luke Devereaux from the Bayou. Wink, wink. You know.
Oh, he's always from the Bayou. I mean, that was how it was in Hard Target too. You know. He's Cajun. Sure he is.
Yeah, I can smell the cafe au lait and the cigarettes on that accent, pal.
Yeah, we got to get you into some other Van Damme movies. But like Street Fighter, it's a movie that will always hold a special place in my heart because I think in a lot of ways it's cemented certain feelings I have about adaptation when it comes to cartoons. You know, because I mean that's what Street Fighter as a property is. It's a cartoon. Like,
totally.
You know, it's a video game, but the models of these video games were not striving for realism. They were cartoon caricatures. And I think there are good things that do, like I'm glad that Vega, he just looks like Vega in the movie. They weren't like, oh, we got to give him like a reason, a better, you know, darker reason why he wears the mask. The mask has to look like gritty and cool and stuff. It's like, no, he just looks like the fucking guy in the game. Like,
yeah, but you know he spends a fair amount of time mask off, you know, weapons off, and then they have this huge sequence of him like building him up as this like really vain matador type character, only for Guile to like smash in the wall, like you said, with a tank earlier in Arrested.
Yeah, it's
nothing comes of this.
It throws. Well, no, him and Ryu fight later because it's like we still have our fight to do, and like Ryu pushes his face up against the furnace while his, you know, the metal's in it, like, oh, you burned my face. We're going to talk a little bit about stuff like that later, but, yeah, Street Fighter, I don't think it deserves the reputation it's had as being like vile trash or anything.
Oh, it's not vile trash. It's, you know, there's certainly things about it that aren't great, but it is this fine, stupid, silly movie. And again, I say stupid, and that sounds like a horrible insult. It's really not.
No, because I mean, it knows that it's a silly idea and property and visual thing. When it leans into those elements, it works more than it doesn't. So, I mean, I have to give it that at least. And Vaya con Dios, Raul, because it really is. I think if nothing else, you need to see Street Fighter. Just like find a compilation or something on YouTube that has everything that Raul Julia does in that movie because it's so great. Like, he is absolutely just towering over every other aspect of that movie. That's kind of where we stand on Street Fighter. But now we have to head over to the shelf where we pick movies that might act as good pairings or substitutions. for our main topic, and we encourage you, loyal listener, to go to GenreVision.com and comment on the post for this episode with your own shelf picks, which we will feature in next week's episode. Travis, what are you pulling off the shelf for Street Fighter?
You know, this is a pretty obvious and I think an easy pick, but the contrast between this movie and Street Fighter is pretty apparent. And this is 1995's Mortal Kombat, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. And what I love about this movie, even though it's not great, like I won't go to bat like really, really hard for this movie, but what I like about Paul W.S. Anderson's approach to video game movies is that he has a good grasp on what the thing is he's adapting. And it was the same when he did the Monster Hunter movie recently. It's like, he knows what this is and he knows why people like it. Like he understands what the base concepts are for, you know, this property and how to get that across in a movie adequately. You know, Mortal Kombat, it has a big cast with recognizable characters who are doing what they do in the video game. You know, same structure of story where it's a martial arts tournament to, you know, defend Earth from Outworld. It doesn't need to be really, really complicated, and it grounds itself really solidly in Liu Kang's perspective.
It's an ensemble. I mean, it's a trio's lead, but Liu Kang is very well balanced as the protagonist.
Right. Well, he's got the fairly solid. He's got the revenge story, right? You know, he's got a family member that died.
Sonya's looking for revenge against Kano as well.
Right.
But they set up like the opening scene is that dream flashback thing of Shang Tsung killing Liu Kang's brother. You know,
right.
Shang Tsung killed my brother.
Yes, he did.
I wish Street Fighter 2, I think it trying to do that big political action movie thing hurt it because the simplicity of the property should be reflected in the structure. That's true with Mortal Kombat. The simplicity of the tournament structure helps that movie a lot.
Yeah, and it almost pains me to say this, but like Paul W.S. Anderson, you know, I'll give him some shit on some of his stylistic choices because I think he makes some good choices. Like I watched Monster Hunter and mostly it's like all boring choices, but in Mortal Kombat, it's at least got a sense of style and vision to it that Street Fighter doesn't have.
Agreed. Mortal Kombat, it's like Mortal Kombat and Event Horizon are easily, I think, Paul W.S. Anderson's best directed movies.
I just got my Event Horizon Scream Factory Collector's Edition Blu-ray.
Hell yeah,
like
brother.
The only Blu-ray I've bought in the last 2 years.
There you go.
I like that movie that much. It's a really good movie.
I know you do. Yeah, I'm planning to rewatch the Paul W.S. Anderson Mortal Kombat before this new one comes out. We did a more episode on it, so go listen to that and our Mortal Kombat Annihilation episode. I like Mortal Kombat quite a bit. I will say like Street Fighter has a bigger chunk of my nostalgia for it, but I like Mortal Kombat more.
Yeah, like I said, I don't go for Mortal Kombat really, really hard, but like I'd watch it right now.
I go pretty hard for it. I think the main, much like Street Fighter doesn't have a lot of street fighting, Mortal Kombat does not have the thing that everybody knew Mortal Kombat for, which is really super gory deaths. But the violence that it does manage to pull off, I think is actually really good.
Yeah. As a PG-13 Hollywood martial arts action film, it's totally fine. And again, it's like if it's a little bit stupid, it should be. That is correct. Anyway, what are you pulling off the shelf for Street Fighter? I
feel like this is the thing I have to pull off because if I don't, somebody else will say it. It is Street Fighter 2, the animated movie. This is the Street Fighter movie. This is the one you want to watch if you want the Street Fighter movie. This understands that some characters don't need to matter, but you need to show them fighting once. That's all you need to do. I believe that happens between E Honda and Dalsim. They're just like out on the street fighting for a scene. And that's it. They have no real motivating issue with the overarching plot. That's it. It's great. But because it's like, I just want to see, like, what do you want to see from a Street Fighter movie if you like Dalsim? It's like, well, he's got to spit fire, right? Don't worry. He's going to spit fire in this. That's all he pretty much does. He's going to spit fire and he's going to have stretchy arms. Like, that's what you'll see in Street Fighter, the animated movie. However, it handles the plotting a lot better in that Bison, who, fun fact, this is probably the only opportunity I have to show this off, a number of names got switched around when they adapted the characters for America. M. Bison is actually the boxer character because it's supposed to be a joke of Mike Tyson. It's M. Bison. Same thing. Balrog is not Vega. I'm sorry. Vega, as we know him, his name is Balrog.
Right.
Bison is Vega in Japan. There's only a couple that they did this with, and I don't know why. I've never looked into it that hard. But anyways, Street Fighter 2, the animated movie, Guile is a character in it, but he's not a main character. He's more of a supporting character. Chun-Li is who she should be, as from the lore of the games, which is she's an Interpol agent, and she is hunting down Bison because he's the leader of a criminal organization. And Ryu is a Street Fighter, very stoic dude. Him and Ken have a friendly rivalry and all this kind of stuff. And you're just going to see a whole bunch of fighting. There's like 7-8 fight scenes in that movie of what you want to see. It's like, oh yeah, Chun-Li and Vega fight. There's a great thing because he talks about his vanity where he takes his mask off and he's all sick and demented and stuff. And she plants her feet on his face and twists it around. He's like, oh no, you fucked up my face. Like, it's great.
But so it's an OVA that's decent, basically, is what you're saying.
I mean, yeah, I'd say it's a really good OVA. Like,
okay, all right.
And it was promoted as the animated movie. I believe it was, I don't know if it came out before, during, or after the Street Fighter 2 anime series, which I think was called like Street Fighter 2 V or Street Fighter 2 something. I never watched that. But Street Fighter 2, the anime movie, which I do believe is available on places like Midnight Pulp, streaming service. If you just want to watch the cartoon of what, Street Fighter should be, this is it. Like, this is the purest distillation of that with fun. It's like, all right, cool. You'll get to see Ryu do a Hadouken, like, which he does not, which they try to do in the live action version. They do a horrible cheat of it where he does the move and like knocks somebody back and they do a flash of white.
Yeah, there's a flash frame. And I was like, was that this really half-assed attempt at a Hadouken? Like, come on.
Same thing. Like Ken does the Shoryuken in the movie. He does it, but fire ain't coming off of him, which is what you're supposed to see. It's like, no, do that.
Yeah, again.
So, but this is another thing about like, should there really be a live action version of Street Fighter, because it's a property that seems best suited for animation, cartoons, video, like that kind of stuff. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll see what happened when they tried to do the real gritty version of Street Fighter with Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that I like about Mortal Kombat, and it doesn't ace this thing, it's like, well, if you're going to do a live action movie of Street Fighter, you have to understand that Street Fighter is about people who can throw fireballs when they say Hadouken. Right. If you're adapting that into a live action movie and you go, well, that's stupid. It's like, well, you're missing, you're kind of like, no, it's not stupid. It's kind of like what we had to get over with superhero costumes in movies. It's like, well, they can't wear this. They can't wear yellow spandex. That's gay.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. And then now comes out. I mean, they tried to, it was a slow progress, but Tim Burton's Batman did help that out, where it's like, no, look, he looks like Batman. Like he looks like yes,
but he didn't look like Adam West,
No, exactly.
That was Batman for a lot of
so
people.
Yes.
Anyway,
Street Fighter 2, the animated movie. I enjoy it. Like it's quite fun. It's simple, cotton candy anime, which nothing wrong with that. But now we have to move over to our listener shelf picks for last week's episode on Godzilla versus Kong. Mr. Milksteak had The Guest, Death Note, and Stranger Things Season 3. The Guest and Death Note obviously being directed by Godzilla vs. Kong director Adam Wingard. And Stranger Things Season 3, yeah, I think visually it had a lot of comparable ideas to what Godzilla vs. Kong was doing.
Yeah, and similar structure, in Kong versus Godzilla, you got, what's her name? Millie Bobby Brown's character.
Sure.
Uncovering like a big secret tunnel that leads to like an international conspiracy. Same thing happens in Stranger Things Season 3. Mm-hmm. So
very, very pointed. Eric Fuchs did not see Godzilla vs. Kong, so just went with a blind shelf pick of War of the Gargantuas, which is a very good Toho kaiju movie. War of the Hairy Frankensteins. JT originally went with Freddy versus Jason, but then you should go read his comment to see the train of thought that he had, which led him to Moral Oral, a Adult Swim stop motion animated show, which is very, very good and very difficult to watch.
Agreed. Yeah, I've seen a bunch of it. Yeah,
extremely. If you watch that thing the whole way through, it is an emotional roller coaster. Eric Johnson, I believe, was doing this as an anti-shelf pick, which was Batman v Superman, because it highlighted some of the same similar problems that they found in Godzilla vs. Kong, which was trying to pack in too much mythology and everything. And it's like, I don't disagree. Cthulhu Ferrigno went with Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah from 1991. Yes, one of my top 5 Godzilla movies. Jetpack Jesus went with an Asylum movie, Mega Shark versus Mecha Shark. Seems appropriate. And last but not least, Steven Espella went with Aquaman, which we're never going to turn down an opportunity to recommend Aquaman because we really enjoyed Aquaman.
Yes, we did.
So thank you, everybody, for the shelf picks. Love seeing these every week and look forward to seeing the ones next week for Street Fighter. Now, we do have to do some calls to action, but stick around because we're going to be doing some currently consuming later where I'm going to talk about a new season of a Hulu animated show, Solar Opposites, and Travis is going to update us with a video game that I recently mentioned in currently consuming. So we did one of our pre-show episodes over at patreon.com/GenreVision. We do one of those every week. This week it was about donuts, breakfast pastries, and as is often the case when we do food episodes, went to some very different, interesting places we did not expect. So if that sounds like something you'd like to check out, you can go to patreon.com/GenreVision and become a premium subscriber for just $5 a month. That will get you access to all of the bonus material we make for GenreVision and our other shows, FinFlix and Third Time's the Charm. Like we said, we do those pre-shows every week. We also do extended currently consumings every month, and a whole bunch of other bonus stuff that I love the Patreon stuff. And if you think that would be something you'd love to, become a premium subscriber over at patreon.com/GenreVision. And the last thing we want to talk about for calls to action is word of mouth, which you'd be surprised for a small little independent show like ours. Word of mouth, just telling somebody else about the show and asking them to check it out, is one of the best ways to help grow the show.
It is. I mean, word of mouth still remains one of the most effective ways to make a podcast more popular. You'd be surprised at how many people keep these things to themselves. But GenreVision's a movie club, and we're always looking for new members to join us every week to talk about our curated schedule of films. So please recommend this show to friends and family, and hopefully they'll be into it just like you are. Trust me, you don't have to be alone like we are.
Okay, that was ominous. Let's shift gears here and do some currently consuming.
Nom 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 nom.
Travis, what's been on your plate?
You bought BioShock, and I was like, I wonder how much the BioShock version, like the remaster, whatever version of BioShock I can get now on my PlayStation 4 costs. Turns out the whole shebang with all 3 games was $10. So I dropped that $10, and I'm playing through BioShock now. And the first couple hours of the game, you know, before you get to, I don't even know if it's a couple hours. That's how long it took me because I was playing it on and off. But before you get to the first Big Daddy, it was like, ooh, this feels very on rails. I feel like I'm just go here, do this, go do that. And I know the game is also commenting on that, so I'm not unaware of it. But I was like, this is all expected. I'm just, you know, completely on the rails. Like am I too familiar with the game? Do I just know it too well? Because it is one of my favorite video games ever. But now that I'm actually in the thick of it in the game, I'm enjoying it a lot more. And one of your tips really helped me with this. I turned off the quest arrow, which is the sort of navigational compass at the top of the screen that's telling you where to go. I turned that off, and the game is much better. You're actually allowed to be directed by the level design instead of just like following where the arrow points you.
Yeah, I finished BioShock recently, and I really enjoyed my time with it. I'm currently in the middle of replaying BioShock Infinite, which I'm just loving. And when I played BioShock, I did that same thing where it was like, oh, there's this quest arrow thing. That's not what I want to do. That's not what I care about. Like, turn that off. The only thing that kind of thing is good for is, oh, it's telling me to go that way. All right. That's the only way I'm not going to go because I want to go explore.
Right, yeah. You know, there's a door with a lever on it that's sparking. I can hit that with the electrified plasmid or whatever it is.
Yeah, and Infinite did a really good job of removing that in a sense, in that there is not just a constant compass, you know, arrow telling you where to go. If you feel stuck, you can press up on the D-pad, and a little ghost arrow will shoot out from you and show you a general, like, it's like, okay, go this way. But that's it, and then it disappears, like, just for a little bit. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, they did a similar thing in the EA game Dead Space, but I'm enjoying BioShock. I do plan on playing BioShock 2, which you've said you may do at some point. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about Infinite when I get to that. But that's all I got.
Well, I watched the second season of the Hulu animated series Solar Opposites. This is created by Justin Roiland and Mike, I think Mike McCann is his name?
Mike McMahon.
Mike McMahon, okay. Who, they have made other animated shows I've liked, Rick and Morty and Lower Decks. McMahon's the showrunner on that. I loved Lower Decks.
Yeah, did you see the trailer for season 2 of Lower Decks?
I've not seen the trailer, no. Does it look good?
It's fun. Can't wait for it. Yeah, it'll
Great.
be August or something like that. Yeah, so I'm in. I really love season 1.
Yeah, loved season 1 of Lower Decks. And I watched the first season of Solar Opposites, and I liked it. I thought it was fun, and clearly it's more Justin Roiland, and I'm very familiar with Justin Roiland's pre-Rick and Morty stuff, where it's like, okay, he's somebody that if you let him chase an idea, he will go nuts with it.
Totally.
And that's part of the appeal of Rick and Morty, but I think Dan Harmon and the other writers over there have a better grasp on kind of reining in the wilder alleys that Justin Roiland can get lost in. And Solar Opposites has some fun stuff in that. In season 2, I certainly had a fun time. My big thing, though, is that there is this essentially C-plot of the show about these shrunken people in the wall of the House of the Aliens that is treated very, very seriously and sincerely, and is this kind of riff on a post-apocalyptic new world society type thing. And it is clearly the thing that people adore about the show that are fans of it. Like there was a Reddit post that I saw when the new season came out where somebody was asking, how much wall is there in season 2? I really love the wall thing. And I'm like, is this what people really like about this show? Because the first season, it was, they would continually go back to this wall thing, and it was taking itself comparatively so deadly serious in comparison to the wacky antics of the main core of the show, that I felt that it was that was part of the joke, that it's like, okay, it's this miniaturized society and they're very, very invested. Like they're not even talking about trying to get big again. They're just living in this weirdo society. But it's taking itself so deathly seriously plotting wise, as opposed to the ridiculousness of the aliens, that I'm like, okay, this seems like it's a gag. Like the gag is that it's being so serious. And then the second season came around, they did the exact same thing again. And as they did in the first season, where it's like, there will be an episode that it's all focused on this. The opening credits will be different. They're not the like alien stuff. It's white text on a black background with somber music. And it's like Solar Opposites. And I'm like, is this the gag? Is the gag that this is this really super serious storyline in the midst of this, because they did the same thing this season 2, which they did in the first season, where the wall episode has some throwaway title of, like Corvo tries to get a bear. And in this one, it's like Terry breaks his favorite shot glass. But the real story is this totally focused on the wall. And I don't care about it at all.
I mean, you're the one man who rails against it, but I feel like in some way you contextualize this wall stuff way different than most everybody else.
I guess.
Like you just weren't able to take it at its level of sincerity. When I watched the wall episode in season 1, and I thought season 1 was fine. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is watchable. I enjoyed it. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this works and is actually getting me to, care like dramatically about what's going on, because I didn't feel it was taking its parody of sincerity or dramatic television so far that it was like, oh, I get the joke. I was like, no, there is an obvious joke here, but it actually is allowing itself to indulge, if you will, in some sincerity. So yeah, I didn't feel like it. I didn't feel wrapped up in some like ironic, fourth dimensional chess thing with it. It was just like, yeah, okay, it's good, and there are some funny gags in here.
I mean, I will say that in season 2, the wall focused episode got like the biggest laugh out of me. There was a really, really funny gag in it. But I just don't. I mean, if it is going for such straightforward sincerity, I have no connection to it at all. Like, I don't care about that story at all. Like, in terms of being dramatic, like, I don't get it, because so much of what I like about Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon and these particular shows, and Lower Decks is this too, Lower Decks is really good at this, is that they are purposefully subverting and messing with story expectation and structure. That is a big thing for them. They're like, we're going to set up something that you are very familiar with this episode premise. Like in the second season, there's one where it's like, in the second season, they start calling themselves the solar opposites, like the aliens do. They're like, the solar opposites are going to jail. And in this one, it's like, they're going to send the kids off to camp, but they don't know what camp is. So they just drive out into the middle of the woods and they all get lost. And it's like, okay, it's going to be a Lost in the Woods episode. And one of the characters even says that. It's like, that's what this is. And then it goes so far in the direction of another totally different story. And it's like, oh yes, this is what they like. They like setting you up that this is going to be a familiar plot that you've seen 1,000 times in other episodic sitcoms. And now we're going to do something really weird with it. And go way off in a totally different direction. And it's like, oh yeah, I like all that stuff. The Wall stuff is not that at all. The Wall is exactly what you expect it to be, dramatically and comedically.
Okay. Well, it's okay if you don't get it. That's fine.
I mean, I there's a part of it that I get that I don't like, which is that because it takes itself so super seriously, I think that's why a lot of people like it. Is because in the midst of this wacky, chaotic, goofball, do whatever show, there's this thread of ultimate seriousness. This matters.
I think the joke, as I understood it, was like, the aliens are going along like carefree in their lives, doing all this stuff and wreaking havoc. But then the show actually sets aside some time to deal with the ramifications of like, oh, what kind of effect does this have on real people? Like all this crap that they're doing. And so they've made a joke about like, well, there's a prison of miniature people in the wall.
Well, I mean, I can understand the joke of like, let's take what is at the outset a C plot and make it essentially its own A. Like what is the A plot going on in a C plot story? Like, and it's like, okay, that's interesting from a storytelling perspective, but I don't know, just so much of it clashes with what I think the show does well and what the show is interested in. And it just, like I said, I'm just not dramatically invested in it at all. And that's clearly people are like, this is the big season arc thing for that show. Like the episodic structure of like the aliens do a goofy thing every episode. Inside of it, it's like, but here's your Game of Thrones. Here's your Lost. Like,
well, they're going to latch on to what people like, and people clearly liked The Wall in season 1.
I mean, I don't think that they were going to abandon it at all. I didn't expect that going in, but I'm like, so is this the show? Like going forward, the show is going to be, it's these wacky alien adventures, but there will always be this through line of a more serialized, serious story going on.
If that's what keeps people watching, absolutely.
Well, sure. Yeah. If it keeps those Hulu subscriptions going up.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, I enjoy it, but they're doing a Christmas special and it's like, I'll watch that. But after that, I'm like, okay, I think my time might be done with this show. I think I'm over it.
Yeah. I'll watch season 2 one day whenever my Hulu subscription is active next, which could be God knows when.
Yeah. But other than that, I guess we can leave things off with our
comment of the week.
And this is a very, 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 very important comment from Eric Johnson, who says, Fearless hosts, are we due for a Q&A episode anytime soon?
Yeah, and the answer is we are absolutely overdue for a Q&A episode. It's been over a year since we've done one. And so, yeah, it'll be a Q&A episode sometime in the next few months. Drew and I are thinking June or July that we'll get our Q&A episode scheduled. As soon as it's scheduled, we will let everybody know and we'll announce it. And we will make sure to beg for questions as we always do. So keep an eye out for that.
So thank you so much, Eric Johnson, for keeping us honest, because yes, we need a Q&A episode and we will be delivering it to you. So we hope you'll be back next week as we continue Fighting Fools Month with Righting Wrongs, also known as Above the Law here in the U.S. This is a 1986 Hong Kong action film co-starring Cynthia Rothrock, who we saw with Michelle Yeoh in Yes, Madam. Travis and I are deeply interested in Cynthia Rothrock as an action star, and we want to watch more of her movies. So this is going to be our second Cynthia Rothrock movie, which, according to some research that we did, she has said this is the favorite of her movies. So, hey, things are looking up next week. And we hope you'll be there checking out Righting Wrongs with us as we continue fighting Fools Month. As always, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. I'm Drew Deitch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And we will see you next week.
Right here on GenreVision.